Thank you, Betsy. So, as you know, we really try to love on our teachers and take care of teachers and all of that. So, it is a great honor to partner with the schools and do all that fun stuff. And so, there we are. So, we're going to be in week 4 of Revelation. So, if you want to turn, you can look at Revelation chapters 2 and 3. We're going to go through the context of the letters. We talked about good doctrine, bad doctrine last week. And you'll have to apologize. I will apologize. How about that? My allergies are kicking my butt today, so enjoy it. All right? And there you go. And I'm going to try to run my own slides because there's a lot of images and a lot of videos that we're going to work through. And so as we're getting there, the 7 churches, and we're going to work through some stuff. And here's what I've, as I studied this and started piecing things together. Some things, there's just like a mystery, and no commentaries actually have an answer. And they're like, we don't know. And so instead of making up an answer and trying to lie to you, I'm just going to tell you there's things that I don't know. Okay? And you're going to be okay with it. And if not, buy me coffee. I don't know. We'll figure that out. So, and there's some things where Jesus is extremely harsh to some of these churches. And some of these situations, you're like, I think you can lighten up a little bit, Jesus, right? Like, we like a little lightened message in our culture and stuff like that. We don't enjoy the harshness that Jesus is going to come across pretty harsh in some of these churches, right? And so there's a nice little lesson I teach to my students sometimes, and it's a little fable. It has 4 lessons at the end of it. And so as you guys are getting into this, so let's just go through this fable, and then we'll figure this out. So there's a little birdie who lives up north, and what do birds do in the wintertime? They migrate south. Well, he delayed a little bit, and his flock went ahead, and so he flew all by himself. And a little later on into the fall, into the winter, and as he's doing so, he noticed that the air was really cold, and he started freezing up in the atmosphere. And so he wanted to warm up, so he went to the ground, he found a pasture, and he's sitting there, he's trying to warm up, but it's like not freezing, but not warm, right? So then some cows walk over to him, and this one particular cow stood right over him, and the bird was annoyed, because now he's blocking the sun. And the cow proceeded to take a crap on him. Right? It went from worse to worse. And so now he's sitting there. He's mad. He's annoyed. He's like, I just got crapped on. But all of a sudden, as he starts moving around, the cow maneuver started thawing him out, started warming him up. And he realized, man, this is something I can move here. And he gets really excited, and he starts chirping, thanking the cow. And he gets so loud, he gets so excited, a cat hears it. And the cat walks over to the pile of crap and picks the bird out and then proceeds to eat the bird. Here's the 4 lessons. Number 1, not everyone who craps on you is your enemy. Sometimes it just has to be said. Number 2, not everyone who helps you out of that pile of crap is your friend with pure motives. Right? Guard your hearts. Right? Number 3, sometimes when you're in a crappy situation, the best thing you can do is shut up and just get through it. You don't need to post everything on social media. You don't need to tell everybody, this is what I'm going through. Ask for prayer. Don't there should be people that know everything about you, but not everybody needs to know everything about you. And number 4, don't trust cats. All right? So, there we are. So, as we get into this, Ephesians is the first church we're going to look at, and you can just kind of read through that as I'm talking. You'll see this. Jesus has a lot of great things to say about the Ephesian church. We've covered quite a bit of it. But then he has these things where he's like, you've lost your first love and all this other stuff. And we tend to think, oh, he's talking about they've somehow lost their love of Jesus. Right? But if you look at the entirety of Scripture, I don't know if that's true. Because what we see in the book of Acts, we see the early days of the church in Ephesians. And it looks crazy. Let me just read some of this part to you in Acts chapter 19. When the gospel became known to the Jews and the Greeks living in Ephesus, they were seized with all fear, for the name of the Lord Jesus Christ was held in high honor. Many of those who believed came and openly confessed what they had been doing and what they had done. A number of those who practiced sorcery, which is witchcraft, brought their scrolls, and they burned them publicly, and they calculated the value of the scrolls to be up to 50,000 drachmas, which is hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in today's economy, right? And that way the word of the Lord spread widely and grew in power. And they started overthrowing the economy. We go into details and stuff like that. Is the zeal of the Lord so powerful that we're overthrowing the economy? Right? Are we burning things of sorcery, witchcraft, your zodiac signs, all that kind of stuff, or are we playing around with it? Right? This is what Jesus is saying. Like, don't lose the good doctrine for the sake of, like, the messy church. Like, I think churches should be messy. I'm a little I get a little suspicious when I see barns that are all nice and clean, right? Like, what work are you actually doing here? If you have a good barn, it should be a little bit of messy and stuff like that. Should it be completely chaos? Probably not, right? Same is true for churches. There should be a little bit mess. And let's not act like you're not messy people, right? We all are. So when I look at this, this is kind of this is what I get a picture of right here. This is one of my friend's bands, his Caustic Eminence. The guy, his name Scott, was like 3 years older than I am. Scott is the guy playing the bass in the white T-shirt with like the brown hair, or the like Caesar look, the bowl cut. So, so brilliant man, great friend, and then he grew up, and now this is Scott's campaign. Let's see if we can find it right here, for prosecutor of all things. He became an attorney. Now he's grown up, right? So we went from this to this. This reminds me of the church of Ephesians. You've lost your zeal. You've lost your craziness. You fought the system as a kid, and now you are the system as a man. And I have this conversation with Scott a lot, so it's fine, right? So, but this reminds me of Ephesians. What Jesus is saying is not to lose the good doctrine, but actually go back to the evangelistic zeal that you had, right? And as a Christian, let's not lose our maturity in our doctrine and stuff like that, but let's keep that evangelistic zeal. Let's keep the fire of, like, I can boldly proclaim Jesus to people, right? And that process of, like, how do we keep both of them going at the same time? Jesus is not saying, hey, your doctrine's so good that you should, like, lessen it up. Please accept heresies. That's not what Jesus is saying, right? And he's also saying, like, yep, let's bring up this is why the top three we talked about a few weeks ago. Who are your top three? Are you praying people into the kingdom of Jesus? Right? Like that's a crucial aspect of it. And then we get to this next church, which is Smyrna. And this is, like, if you read through it, as you're reading through it, there's a line that kind of stands out to me. The synagogue of Satan. It's not a compliment, in case you were wondering, right? Now, here's what we need to, like, kind of distinguish. So a synagogue is not a Christian church. It's a Jewish meeting place. They would have had scriptures. There would have been, like, scrolls and stuff like that. So it's not translation from, like, church to synagogue. Does that make sense? Like, some pastors are saying it's equal transferable. It's not. They're just not the same thing. But it is the very place where the message and the good news of Jesus started. Like, Jesus taught in synagogues. It should be a safe place for people who say, in this crazy pantheonic worship of, like, Caesar's Lord and all the pantheons of God, the 28 different gods that they were worshiping, it should be a safe place for people to say, no, there is only one God, right? But it becomes this place of contention and other forms of persecution. The city of Smyrna is the modern-day city of Izmir, and it's named after this perfume. We kind of sound familiar to it once I walk you through this, but they take the fruit that smells really nice and sweet, and they crush that fruit, and they make it into a perfume called myrrh. This was the headquarters of the myrrh production, right? And if you read through the scriptures and the Gospels, you're like, oh, there's myrrh all over the place. This place had a booming economy because of this and other things, right? And so I think it becomes this beautiful illustration of what's actually going on in the church of Smyrna, where they're being crushed, and there's a beautiful fragrance that comes out of that crushing. They're being squeezed, and what's being squeezed out of them is Jesus and faithfulness to Jesus. So I'm just going to ask you this. When you're squeezed, when pressure happens, does Jesus' love flow out of you? Or do you accidentally cuss? Do you tell people, you're number one? Read between the lines. You know what I mean? I won't do it here, so there you go. Use your imagination of what I'm trying to say. But when you're squeezed and when you're pressed, what comes out of you? That should be a question we start looking through. Here's what verse 10 says. This is not encouraging either. But he says this, don't be afraid for what you're about to suffer. Thanks a lot, Jesus. Awesome. Like Jesus saying, you're going to suffer. But don't be afraid of it, right? It's a reminder for us in the ways of Jesus. When we follow Jesus, we are not safe from situations, but we're safe in situations. Like Jesus is not saying, and there's heresy all over the place that says, if your life is getting bad, then that means you must be sinning. And if your life is good, then you must be being blessed. Sometimes you could be doing the exact same thing that Jesus is asking you to do, and you're going to see struggles and pressure and all that. Just keep going. Your faithfulness is not because of the results are not because of everything you've done. Jesus is asking you to be faithful, not productive. And that's the crucial aspect of following Jesus. Right? These little words matter for us. The beauty of the church is in this fragrance of being crushed out and stuff like that. Now, look at verse 9. I know your afflictions and your poverty, and yet you are rich. Could he easily say that about us? Are we being afflicted? Are we sitting in poverty, but yet we're rich in the kingdom of heaven? Or don't we want to be rich in this earth too? In this world as well? So here's the question that we have to ask. The Smyrna has this booming economy. There's no real reason that somebody should be poor in that church. Unless you're locked out of the economy. Because you won't worship Caesar. Remember, in order for you to buy and sell goods, you would have to go to the marketplace, burn incense and pray not for Caesar, but to Caesar. And say that he is Son of God, King of Kings, and Lord of Lords. And if you don't do that, then you can't participate in the economy. That's why they're poor. What's Jesus worth to you? Is he worth being locked out of the economy for you? It's really comfortable to be a follower of Jesus in America. And we read these and we're like, man, that happened so long ago, it'll never happen here. It's happening in China. It's happening in Iran. It's happening in other places around this world. We could probably start learning from this. And remember, this is not written to us, this is written for us. So we can't hijack it and say, well, this is what it means for us now. Doesn't matter. Right? You can learn from these lessons. And there was this persecution that was relentless from the Romans. And now there becomes a persecution that's relentless from the Jewish synagogues. And this is why they get called the synagogue of Satan. And so, once again, they're not trying to be, the Romans' persecution is not because they're worshiping Jesus, it's because they won't worship Caesar, right? And there's this discussion among the Senate to add Jesus into the Roman pantheon of gods so that they could lessen the persecution. And because of that phrase that Caesar is Lord, he's the Son of God, he's the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, the Christians were like, we're not doing that. Imagine saying, no, we want more persecution because we won't allow you to add Jesus to the pantheon of gods. Sign us up for more persecution, please. Because Jesus is the Son of God. He is the Lord of Lords and the King of Kings. As you go through the Colosseum in Rome, there's a placard that's engraved, and that's what it says. And all the arenas around the Roman Empire had that engraving as well. And the Christians said, nope, Jesus is, not Caesar. Right? And this is kind of that understanding of this, because they really did believe when Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and nobody comes to the Father except through me. And they also really believe that Jesus said, when he says this, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, and your mind. This is a central way of teaching and living for the people in Jesus' day, in 95 AD. And so, when they offer this, now all of a sudden there's this tension. And I think we've talked about this, if not, I'm just going to say it again. Around Paul's time, in the 60 ADs, he could pray for Caesar, and then he could participate in the market. Well, those different Nero and all that, they changed it so that now you have to pray to Caesars. And so that's how Paul could participate in the markets, and now other Christians can't because that change in the egotistical way of approach, right? Not just pray for me, but pray to me. You have to have a massive ego to say that, right? Imagine saying that to somebody. Don't just pray for me, but pray to me. And by the way, if you don't, I'm going to kill you. That's a pretty big ego. I'm sorry. So that's how this transition takes place. And so now all of a sudden you have people that are like, man, I want to participate in this. And the synagogue leader, the Jewish people, actually have this like this little loop clause or whatever you want to call it, like a loophole. And this clause where the synagogue leader would keep a list of names of Jewish people who were praying for Caesars, and they could go into the marketplace and participate in all that. But if you made that synagogue leader mad, he would take your name off that list. And this is the persecution now coming from the synagogues. Now all of a sudden, now what do you do? How do you buy and sell your goods? Do you really trust Jesus is going to participate and help you out and take care of you and all that? And so this is part of that process. And so there's that one. So the synagogue of Satan. And then we're going to go to the city of Satan. All right? So here is this video. It's going to be this 3D rendering of Pergamum. So they've done some archaeological digs. We're going to work through this city. To have a title of your city called the Satan City, you have to be pretty bad. Right? So this theater that you see is the steepest theater in the Roman Empire. It seats about 10,000 people. And you can sit at the very bottom of it and speak clearly like I am right now, and you hear it very clear at the very top. They are brilliant architects and figure out how to do this. And there's all these other little temples and things that are laid out throughout this. And so here is the next one we're going to look at is the Temple of Dionysus. Temple of Dionysus is party, it's wine, it's an outdoor temple, it's an open air temple. And so there's all these like kind of structures and stuff like that. Think Mardi Gras, spring break, and anything that happens in Vegas stays in Vegas all in one. Along with random animal acts as well. Just let it sit, right? So, in Greek mythology, Dionysus will die and be resurrected from the dead. So in John 11, when Jesus says, I'll be put to death and raised from the dead, all the people in the Roman Empire who knew Greek mythology would be like, Dionysus already did that. Why would you do that? That doesn't make you any special. Right? And so here's this process, and there's like that's one aspect of this place. Greek, like all of that kind of stuff. The theater seats 10,000 people, steepest place. And in the Roman culture, remember they would conquer lands, and that just made them like part of the Roman Empire. But how do you change somebody from being a conquered land to make them more Roman? You do it in the theater. You tell stories. If you want to re-educate a group of people, you can't just force them to do it, right? It's not Men in Black where you just like wipe their memory with that little flash. That doesn't work. So the way that they would do that is they would have several different kinds of theater. The drama and the comedy were the most popular ones because they would grossly make fun of people. There was no like PG-13 rated R. There was just like all out there, right? And so the way that they would do this, they would take the concept they want to re-educate and kind of get you to think through and accept the new ideology, and they would get you to laugh at it. Because if you can get you to laugh at the idea, then they're going to get you to think about it and accept that concept. And if you accept it, then maybe you'll adopt that concept. Is there anything new under the sun? Do you see how this just kind of loops through? Maybe not being a theater that seats 10,000 people, but what are you streaming? What are you watching? What are you considering? Are you laughing at things that would not line up with the Bible? Are you considering things that would not line up with the Bible? Are you adopting things that would not line up with the Bible? This is the form of re-education and all that has not changed, right? So that's how they would do this and stuff like that. So here is the next place we're going to look at. This is the Temple of Demeter. Demeter is still in that same city of Pergamum, and it is the place, the god and the goddess of agriculture and grains and stuff like that. So if you wanted to buy your like premium version of stuff, you wouldn't take it to the marketplace. You'd take it to the Temple of Demeter because it's pure and holy and all that. And the way that you would do that, if you walk in, and you would offer a sacrifice to the goddess with a lamb or a bull. Because it was through your blood, through the blood of the lamb or the bull, that your sacrifice was made holy for the goddess, right? And so, if you're not going to offer a sacrifice for the Caesar at the marketplace, now you have to make this at the Temple of Demeter, right? And so there's all this other kind of place and stuff like that. Here is the next one. This is the Temple of Asclepius. Asclepius is the divine healer. right? So here is the statue of Asclepius. It's a rod with a snake around it. They saw that the snake was the symbol of rebirth and regeneration and all that. Snakes are evil. They're right up there with cats for me, so we're not going to stay here long. But here is the modern-day version of this. Asclepius' temple was a very sophisticated hospital. And I'm not saying you worship Asclepius or Satan if you go to a hospital, but you get the idea, right? This is a little concerning. That the temple was more of a hospital. But in order for you to get seen by a doctor, you had to worship Asclepius with a sacrifice. So if you have a sick kid, now you have to worship Asclepius through your prayer, your sacrifice, and offering and all that, just to have a doctor see your child. Do you see how this could be a tension moment for you as a follower of Jesus in these cities? And so, this is why I know you live. You live in you live in Satan City. That would just be a crazy thing for us to think through. And then Jesus will talk about Balaam and Balak. This is a reference back to Numbers 22 in the Hebrew Scriptures. It's a great example of what it looks like to be a compromised prophet. That these prophets are saying things to the people that they want to hear, not the things that God is actually telling them to say. Because they want to have influence over the people. They don't want to hurt the people's feelings. Because if you hurt their feelings, they're not going to like you and all this other stuff. And so Balaam does that. That's what he ends up doing in Numbers 22. And now they have prophets in Pergamum saying, hey, don't worry about it. Just keep your fingers crossed when you go through these processes. Worship, offer the sacrifice, but just keep your fingers crossed behind your back. Jesus knows your heart. And the prophets are saying this. This is why he's saying, not only do you have to figure out how to not worship these gods and goddesses, but now you have people among your church who are false prophets who are saying the things that it's leading to compromise, right? And if it's leading to compromise, eventually you just look and act and behave like the rest of the world. And if followers of Jesus, we continually compromise, we have nothing to offer the rest of the world when we end up compromising. So let's not compromise, right? So Jesus' way is continually going to be countercultural. Here's the next city, Thyatira. Now, it's a military fortress that Alexander the Great in 350 BC is going to do this. It's an extremely prosperous town. It's a middle-class town compared to the rest of them. There is a signature red dye that they're going to make because of the mineral water that's rich in their minerals from the mountains and stuff like that. They have a huge textile industry. When you read through the book of Acts, this lady named Lydia is going to be from Thyatira, and she's a textile lady, right? It's a way of life. They have these massively important things to them called the guilds. Think unions, but on steroids, okay? So the loyalty to the union does not even compare to the loyalty of the guilds in this day and age. In order for you to be part of the guild, you have to be trained and apprenticed and all that. And when you went to your guild meeting, you would offer a sacrifice to the god of that guild. And then make another sacrifice to Apollo. Right? So, now if you're a follower of Jesus, now you've spent all of your life being an apprentice for woodworking, for textile, for bread, for whatever. Now what do? Do you show up late, hoping that you don't have to make that sacrifice to the guild meeting? And do you leave the guild? And then you're exiled? And if you lose your job over this, is that big of a deal? Is Jesus worth losing your job over? Right? That's a real question they have to constantly look through. And so now all of a sudden, now you have this process, but how do you pay the bills? Now, there's this line that here, and this is one of those things that nobody really knows, so I'm going to give you my best guess of what I think is being said here, but the reference to Jezebel. And anytime you see the prophetess of Jezebel, it's not a compliment in the scriptures. You just need to keep that in mind. It's usually a pretty big slam. Jezebel in the Hebrew scriptures is not is a horrible lady as well. We don't have time to get into it. But just reading through the context, you can realize it's not a compliment at all. My best guess is that she taught the deeper things of Satan, meaning that she's like, hey, I've been enlightened to this. Have you ever been around a Christian who's like, man, I've studied this so much, and here's a traditional teaching of Jesus, but I've dove into so much that I'm enlightened to this new teaching of Jesus, and here's a new interpretation of it and all this other stuff. There are people out there, just look it up on YouTube. They'll find you too. But it's there. And you need to be aware of this. Part of you deciphering through what the Bible actually says and what does Jesus actually mean is it's not just trusting yourself. And don't trust somebody who just has a big following on YouTube or TikTok or fill in the blank, right? Or a TV show and they have white hankies. Just because they have a white hanky when they preach does not mean that that's like some elite symbol. You just need to be aware of that, right? So keep that in mind. Use the Holy Scriptures, use the Holy Spirit, discern what they're saying. Jesus doesn't want you to be fooled, right? And just because somebody can say some nice things and make you feel all good and your heart went pitter-patter does not mean that's truthful. Be aware of it, right? And don't give in to the prophetess of Jezebel at the same time. So I think that's what's actually going on here, that she's teaching some kind of thing like, hey, just give into it, don't, like very similar to the Nicolaitans and all that. So now let's go to this next city of Sardis. Alexander the Great will kind of take it. He says he liberated it from this other kingdom. Essentially, he conquered it and took it into his own kingdom. Does that make sense? In 354 BC. The ruins of this place will tell us what is actually going on here. This is the synagogue. It's the largest synagogue outside of Palestine in the Roman Empire. And these images tell us a little bit of like what's actually going on in the loyalty or the lack thereof of the synagogue. It's kind of hard to see probably on the TV, but there's pagan symbols all throughout the whole Jewish synagogue. And on the ends of the altar, there's the Roman eagle. No good Jewish synagogue would allow pagan symbols and have a Roman eagle in there. You've now somehow compromised. It'll get worse, don't worry. But it raises the question, why is this in here? Right? Like, what's actually going on here? It's the largest one, has the largest amount of influence and actual geographic space. But it looks like the Jewish people and the Christians are going to worship Jesus and the pantheon of gods. We in America would never do this, I know. Like, we are better than this. We would never worship Jesus and anything else. Right? So here's the marketplace, the Caesar's marketplace. Here's another picture of the synagogue, just so you can have one. But in this picture, you have these, you see the crosses and those little stones right here. Remember, in order for you to get a booth in this marketplace, you worship Caesar and pray to Caesar first. But now the booth boxes tell us that there's Christians in there. So you see the influence of like, just compromise. And once again, when we compromise and act and look just like the rest of this world, we have nothing to offer the rest of this world. And this is what's going on in Sardis. This is one of those things that you would do that. And here's what Jesus is going to say to them. You look alive, but you're dead. Have you ever had a moment of compromise where you look alive, but you know there's some secret back inside your heart in your life that ever got exposed? You'd be screwed. What Jesus is saying is like, wake up. It's time for you to like get rid of this, right? If somebody saw that text message to that other person, if we knew your browser history, if we could actually read your thoughts, let's not go there, but like, what would that reveal to us? And so, that reference about the thief in the night, this is a reference back into their like, yep, it could just be a simple line, thief in the night. I'll give you that. But there's two moments in their history where they got conquered by a thief in the night. Cyrus is going to come at one point in the Persian Empire. He's going to surround them, and he's going to try to take them over. And he can't do it. He can't figure out how to get into this fortified city. So he sieges them. He just kind of surrounds them and waits it out. And one of their watch guards from the Persian army is watching this guy in the wall of Sardis. And the guy looks over, and his helmet falls down. So the guy kind of disappears. The watchman disappears. And the Persian army guy watches the secret door open in the wall. And the guy grabs his helmet, closes the door, walks back up to the wall. Like nobody ever knew anything better. So now they start planning this plot. And so the Persian army attacks the opposite side of it, while the special forces break into the secret door and steal the city. This is going to happen twice in their city. You would think if it happened once, you should probably fix it, right? But I don't think they kept records like this. I don't know. Maybe. So this will happen twice. So when Jesus says, like wake up, or I'm going to steal you like a thief in the night type thing, like you're vulnerable and you don't even know it. Like that secret that is eating at you that you know is going to hold you. Remember, the psalmist says, like, your sin is not what separates you from God. It's your pride that keeps you from confessing that sin that separates you from God. This is crucial for us. We all have secrets among ourselves. We all have secret sins that, like, if it got exposed, we'd be screwed. The question is, are you willing to confess to some people and ask for accountability and ask for some help? This is why we don't just sit and do church like this. This is why we do church like missional communities, and we get to know each other. And he says, go on and wake up from it. Philadelphia is the next one. And this whole region, by the way, would be thriving until 17 AD. This whole region, if you wanted to have a governor's position, meaning you oversaw all these cities, this is the place you wanted. Philadelphia is going to have this massive earthquake, is going to wreck Philadelphia. The Roman Senate is going to say, hey, we're going to give you 5 years tax-free. Would anyone take that? I would, right? Unless I knew that I now owed Rome something back. Anytime you get something from the government, it's never going to be free, right? So younger people, just keep paying your Social Security so I can retire at some point. That's all you need to know when it comes to taxes, right? Just keep paying into it. So Rome is going to offer them the tax-free for 5 years. They take it, and then they rebuild this. And the way they rebuild this is they realize their economy needs to be a little bit more diversified. So they take that money and they start investing into vineyards, and they have amazing vineyards. Like their wine would compete with the Roman vineyards and the Roman wine. And it was a good economy, right? If you have more options, you have more competition, drives innovation, all that kind of stuff. Well, Domitian comes in and he's like, I want everyone to buy from the Roman vineyards. So he literally rips up their vineyards in Philadelphia. He tries to break their backbone as a city and all this. And somehow they stay faithful. The church stays faithful. Imagine if your economy got lost. We saw this in COVID. During COVID, people lost their faith as they lost their jobs. For some people, it literally became the thing that wrecked their faith. For other people, they lost their jobs, and it drove their faith even more. Like it grew their faith, right? Same situations, different perspective, right? So are you going to trust Jesus even when your economy is completely broken? Even when everything you thought you could pride yourself into is gone, and you can't pay your bills? Do you trust Jesus still? Now let's get to this last one, Laodicea, okay? Laodicea is this interesting church. Once again, that 17 AD earthquake is going to happen, and instead of accepting the Roman gift, they say, nope, we got this. They had enough of a surplus that they did not need any help from Rome. They prided themselves on doing this. The problem was, as a city, they didn't have a water source. So they took in aqueducts for miles upon miles. They had two options. Colossae gave them cold water from the mountains because of the minerals and all this other stuff. By the time it got to them through these aqueducts, imagine like the heat and all that, it becomes this tepid, warm, just kind of gross water. And it picked up, you'll see this in the piping right here. This is some of the piping. That mineral buildup is going to deposit into the water. Have you ever had water so full of minerals? It was this is disgusting, right? There's a good balance, right? Let's not strip it all out, but and the smell is even worse, right? The other option is Hierapolis, which was all hot water springs, and it smelled so bad of sulfuric acid. So here's all this pride. They have man, we have so much money, we have so much economy, we have so much booming. You can see the miles of the aqueducts. By the way, 2,000 years ago. We can't build a road that lasts 2 winters. Let's figure this out. 94 is always under construction. They must just start right back up. Anyway, that's an annoying. I'm just annoyed with that one. So, so all these aqueducts for miles and miles and miles. And notice what Jesus is going to say in Revelation 3:15. I'm going to vomit you out of my mouth. right? The traditional take from this church, from a pastor is like, hey, just love Jesus better, love Jesus more, or I'm going to vomit you out. You either become really, really hot for Jesus or really like just walk away from faith. We've talked about this, like this is a deconstruction type message in that regard. But I don't think that's what Jesus is saying. I think what Jesus is saying in context of this whole concept is like, let's not get so prideful that you think you can do this all on your own. Right? Do you have a good job? Yeah. Did God give you those gifts? Mm-hmm. He gave you those gifts, so thank God for those gifts. Did you come from point A to point B and your life is better than what it was as you grew up, from when you grew up? Yeah. Well, let's not say you did it all by yourself. Those are gifts from God. And I'm wondering if the arrogance and the pride from the Laodicean city of like, Rome, we don't need your help, has crept into the church. Like, Jesus, we don't need your help. We've got this. And sometimes we do that in American church, don't we? We love the kingdom, but not necessarily the king. And some churches love the king of Jesus, but don't love the kingdom of Jesus. And I think this is the pressure that we find ourselves in America, especially when it comes to politics. I think Republicans really love the King Jesus, but not his king and his ethics. And I think the Democratic version of life love the kingdom of Jesus, but not necessarily the authority and the position of him as king. And so we find ourselves in this tension, and we think as Americans we can have this pride that we can say, I got this. I don't need your help, Jesus. And I think what Jesus is saying is, no. You can't do anything on your own. Did you die on the cross for your own sins? Nope. If it wasn't for me, you'd still be dead in your own sins, right? So where does this like all land for us, right? These 7 churches, we drank from a fire hose. I get it. A lot of information. And I think here's the deal. Some churches have nothing but Jesus, and yet they have everything they need. And other churches have Jesus plus something, and Jesus says, you have nothing that you actually need. And where do you find yourself in this place? Because we all show up to this place with different backgrounds, different situations. But I think we just need to realize, let me just hold on to you, Jesus. Everything else is temporary, right? And it'd be easy to say, I'll never face persecution. I don't know if you ever will in America. But if we ever do face persecution, I don't think we should actually pray for us to get out of that persecution. But we would be faithful in the face of that persecution. As I talk with missionaries and people around the world that actually live in those kind of situations where they face persecution, that seems to be their prayer, is they don't want to compromise their faith in the face of persecution. 2020 was not persecution, by the way. You just had to wear a mask. Let's not lose our mind over something else like that again, right? So, when we trust Jesus, it'll lead to obedience, faithfulness in his ways. And let's accept the King and the kingdom. Let's pray. Jesus, thanks for this day. Thanks for who you are and everything you've done for us. Jesus, thanks for these lessons that we get to learn from these churches. And would you help us to be faithful and obedient to you and to your ways and to hold on to your truth? And Jesus, there's no one forcing us to not worship you. But there's plenty of things that are asking us to worship them. God, would you give us the ability to decipher and say, you're not a God, I don't need to worship you. You're not that important. And to stay faithful to you, Jesus. We love you, God. So you we pray this. Amen. Well, if you need prayer for anything, I'd love to meet you in the back at the green wall. If you're new with us, check out guest services and stuff like that. And on your way out, don't forget Mission Sunday. Whatever God asks you to do, just give towards Destiny Rescue. All right, let's go. Be the church. Have a good week. We'll see you next Sunday.